what intrigued me about the Ghostwalkers is I would always do research on paranormal, like psychic abilities. And every single country in the world has experimented with psychic abilities. Everybody has. And so it was really interesting to go and look at what Russia did and what China did and what India did and what we did. And then go, okay, so say somebody, fast, he's a thinker who thinks ahead. And then I would do research on those particular psychic abilities in the military. Like, what did they do? And I was very lucky to hook up with some guys who had worked in various special for like all the different branches of the special forces. And then I have another primary source who kind of was a think tank for a while he worked in the Defense Department. And so it all like made me really want to come up with this experiment. And then the first one obviously was not going to be that successful. There were going to be things that were wrong. And then he would get his next group of men, and then they would do a little bit better. But the guy doing the experiments couldn't help himself. He wanted to make super soldiers, so that his idea was, instead of sending in a whole unit of men who would maybe get killed, he could send in a very small group, and they could do what all these men could do, and he would be saving lives. So in some ways, Whitney is a patriot. He's just insane. And so, so that was really fun to make him crazy. And you didn't know that he was in the beginning. And he's got the backing of a lot of very powerful people, and he has a lot of money. So that allowed me to create all kinds of really bad things going on. I love doing that. And I do so much research on, are they trying to harness lightning, which by the way they are, and what different weapons and what different missions can I send them on? And then I try to have three primary sources where I get things right. And in the beginning, when I first started writing them, I didn't ever use bad language. And finally, some of the military guys would write to me and say, Miss Feehan, we don't say, golly gee, the bullets are flying. And I was like, I've never said that. And they're like, this is what we really say. And so I had to make it a little more real, because, like how the men would talk to each other, because they were reading the stories and I didn't, I apparently wasn't using their language. So I had to like step that up a little bit. But what I do is I do research into what is being done in the military and how can I use that. And a few times I've gotten in a little bit of trouble, because like one time I was coming up with a particular weapon for a submarine, and I kept sending it to my nephew, who was in the Navy, and he had worked submarines, and then he became a doctor. But we were using the Navy, his work. And I was sending him, well, what about this? Do you think this would work? And then pretty soon he's like, hey, this is getting a little too real. Maybe we need to stop here. And the next thing I know, I get a little letter from NCIS. And I'm like, oh my God. After that, I'm telling my researcher that helps me. I'm like, maybe we should use your computer and not mine. And I did have certain ones that I really, really loved, where the Norton brothers were two brothers that I particularly loved. And the interesting thing about those two characters, Jack and his brother, they're twins. In the early days, before I ever published, they were cowboys and they were circus actors and I used those same characters like in all these different settings in really bad books. And so when it came to my military series, I suddenly realized this is where they belong. And I was able but they were beloved characters that I'd known for years. And so I really enjoyed writing their stories. Those stories were important to me. And I love my fourth team very, very much. The ones that look to be, he thought he was doing the perfect ones now. But they have terrible problems. So it was interesting to find these men that I love, the characters that are repeated in each of the books. And then you're coming up with their stories. Ryland was the first, he was in the first team. He comes back and you're still realizing that his team still has these terrible problems. And that's what I love about writing consistently within teams. And you have so many characters in each one that you fall in love with, and you want to, and then you find the woman that goes with them. I had Samurai Game and a few others that I loved writing those stories. Thunder Game is actually a book that I wrote on basically somebody who's suicidal. And this is a man who did everything he was supposed to do. Uh, he's he's the brother of the one in Lightning Game. And now his brother he always looked after him. And now his brother is settled, has a wife, and he feels like, okay, I'm done. I can go back home to the Appalachian Mountains, and he wants to be there so they won't take his body. He knows his brother will cremate him so the government can't take his body, and he can be with his family up in the mountains. But as he goes up there, of course, this character that I developed, who I love, and he's a man who actually had been in the Vietnam War. So he's an older man, but he was one of the very first Ghostwalkers. And you find that out in Lightning Game. And he's under attack. And of course, Diego is not about to allow anybody to hurt this older man. And so he ends up realizing, I do have purpose other than just being my brother's keeper. And, so that was something that I feel there's so many veterans who do all these heroic things, and then they get to a place where they just can't, or feel like they can't continue. And so I wanted to write a book about that. In Power Game, I think it was Power Game, one of my men had his leg amputated. And, I try to do real things that happen to these men who go out there and serve our country, and then they come home and they're kind of lost. And what do you do with them? So those are important issues that I try to work into those stories, and I do a lot of research.